But switching gears a little bit, there are some agreements that have different windows of opportunities, specifically prenuptial agreements and even postnuptial agreements. It's a very sensitive topic. It's one that creates a very heated conversation. Can you give us your general guidance? And obviously, you know, we're aware of where you stand on this, but for the folks who don't know, what you think about prenuptial agreements and whether a postnuptial agreement is something that is worth pursuing, can you give just some general advice or guidance on those two things?
So my first two things, one, I have one, a prenup. And everyone has a prenup, by the way. It's just the default laws of your state. That's what my lawyer said to me when I was in the prenup process. And it is such a good reframe, though, because everyone's like, oh, no, I love and trust my partner. We would never need a prenup. Okay, first of all, dramatic eye roll there, because you cannot control another human being. You can love and trust your partner. You also can be the person who says, literally, no matter what happens, I will stay. They might choose not to stay. And doesn't matter if you said that you're going to stay, they can walk out the door. So that's thing one. On the topic of everyone has a prenup, so the point there is, if you're in a position where you are going through a divorce proceedings without an actual prenuptial agreement, the default laws are now whatever your state says is fair. And what I think is really powerful about the prenuptial agreement is you are not just defaulting to what the state thinks is fair. The two of you get to decide for the ecosystem of your relationship what you both feel is fair. And then you draft an agreement. You're probably going to negotiate a little bit along the way, and then you sign it. And it's marriage insurance. Let's hope we don't have to use it. Just like we all hope we don't have to use our car insurance. We all hope we don't have to use our homeowner's insurance. You know, we use our preventative health care, but we hope that we don't have to have the big bills for the hospital, but we have insurance in case something happens. Prenups really are marriage insurance, with a terrible, terrible reputation, unfortunately, that I'm trying so hard to push against. Yeah. And on timing, though, if you want a prenup, I recommend bringing that up before you're even engaged. Like if you are barreling down the path of this is going to be my person, talk about that stuff early. Like give somebody quite a long chance to think about it, have a talk with other people about it, bring up your reasons about why you want to have a prenup. My big talking point, and I did bring it up before we even got engaged, was I would never sign a business contract without reading it through and making sure that the terms were fair. And the majority of people in the United States sign their marriage license, which is a contract, without reading the terms and conditions. And of course, it's about love and about trust. But this is also probably the biggest financial decision you are ever going to make in your entire life. And to make that decision without reading the potential consequences it's like, why? Come on. At least know what your state says would happen in the case of a divorce, what alimony looks like, what child support looks like, who would pay that to who. You can waive alimony in a prenup, by the way. So there's just all sorts of things to consider. At the very least, see if somebody who has one will talk to you, or go talk to a lawyer about it just to get the information. But take a lot of time. When it comes to a postnup, one more thing about the prenup. If somebody is telling you that you have to sign this or I won't marry you, and they do it like under duress where maybe there's only a couple weeks left till the wedding, that's a big red flag of a relationship, just by the by. And if they blame it on their parents, like maybe the parents said last minute, first of all, please don't ever blame it on your parents, because you're just going to sour the dynamic between your spouse and your parents. That's going to be kind of a hard thing to forgive and get over. But if the parents are bringing that up, then you also need to sit down and have a conversation about what is fair, because it is fair to protect assets. It's fair to protect a trust or an inheritance that might be coming to a person. But you need to have the longer form conversations of, well, what happens if you inherit and then we buy a house with it and some of my money still goes into the mortgage, but do you just get to keep the house if we get divorced because we put a down payment with your inheritance? Like I said, you want time, because I promise you're going to get into a fight, no matter how wonderful your relationship is. You will disagree at some point in the prenup process. It brings up so many strong emotions. You get so territorial, just like wedding planning. Guys, wedding planning also brings up so many feelings, and everybody gets so territorial and defensive of their families. So just keep that in mind. Give yourself a ton of time. A postnup, if you don't have a prenup, a postnup is a pretty hard pitch because it does sound like I'm about to divorce you plan. Like that shouldn't be. I'm not saying it's impossible, but if you didn't at least have the prenup conversation and then maybe you're like, oh, we ran out of time, we'll do a postnup. Okay, great, whatever. I do think if you have a prenup, it really behooves you at some point to do a postnup as life changes. So let's say somebody taps out of the workforce for a period of time to take care of kids or a family member. And let's say that you both waived alimony in your prenup. Well, now that's not fair if somebody tapped out of the workforce to take care of kids. You should get paid alimony in the case of a divorce. So it does matter to look back at the prenup throughout the course of your marriage and say, does this still feel fair for the current ecosystem? And if not, you make a postnup.
As we shared in our book, our first conversation about money led to an argument and ultimately a breakup. Luckily, we found our way back together and got on the same page about life and money. Because of this, we're often asked to help other couples find their rhythm in what we call the he said, she said dance.
But don't get it twisted. Just because we're talking about dancing doesn't mean you need to improve your footwork. The real work is all in the mind. Once you and your partner get that right, everything else falls into place. And sometimes the most awkward conversation you need to have is with yourself. In your experience, because we get asked this question a lot about, my husband or my partner or my wife, whoever is a spender, I'm the saver, or vice versa. And we consider that to be a mistake, labeling anybody as a spender or a saver and creating this fixed identity for this person is likely going to present an obstacle in any conversation that you have. But I'm curious, from your experience, do you notice any common mistakes that partners have when they are confronting the other one about spending or saving money?
Yeah, you're dismissing their values most of the time in these conversations. Because there's a couple reasons why somebody might be a quote unquote spender. And it could be that there is some emotional trigger as to why they spend, which needs to be more further addressed probably in therapy or financial therapy, which is a thing. But that might be a conversation that you have where it's not so much pointing out this behavior, it's questioning, why do you feel the need to do this? Because I've noticed that it does keep happening, or I've noticed it happens when blah, blah, blah trigger arises, and bringing that up, because somebody might not even be noticing it about themselves. But if it's a perpetual issue that's maybe really disrupting your household budget, then it definitely needs to be a conversation between the two of you. But the other thing that sometimes people attack each other about is they're making values judgments, right? Like, you keep buying XYZ every month, and I don't think you should be spending your money on that. Well, why? You think that because you don't value that thing. But if your partner values that thing, that's okay. Now, if it is blowing up your budget, again, you have to be having a conversation about, if this is something that you value, is there a way that we can find a more affordable option to be able to have you keep doing that? Or can we reallocate money? Or can we figure out how to earn more money? Like, there needs to be a more nuanced conversation. But the questions always, I think, need to come down to value sets. And are we just looking at a conflict here where one of you thinks something is worth it and the other one doesn't? And I also think it's very important to dispel this notion that people think that saving is like quote unquote good and spending is bad, where people can be like too frugal to the detriment of themselves and everyone around them.
Yeah, and they never end up enjoying the money.
Right. So accumulation for the sake of accumulation is still a problem. Like, that's actually basically consumerism in a different way, right? So it is so important to think about also, if you're the one that's maybe hyper frugal and your spouse is getting really frustrated that you never spend money on anything, also addressing, why do I feel this way? What is triggering me to feel like I need to be accumulating XYZ amount of money? And checking in with yourself every time you hit a goal, Like if you wanted to have 100,000 and then you wanted to have 250,000, then you wanted 1 million, how do you feel each time you hit them? Does it actually scratch any itch, or is it like now on to the next? I mean, listen, money always just comes back to psychology at the end of the day. We want the life hacks, we want the tricks, and it works to a degree, but so much of this is needing to be introspective and self-reflective about why we are behaving the way that we are with money. And it is almost 100% of the time a psychological reason that we're doing the thing that we're doing.
Isn't that fascinating? All right, that is a wrap. We hope you enjoyed this episode of Cashing Out the Podcast. To see more videos like this, subscribe to our YouTube channel and be sure to turn on your notifications. To get your copy of Cashing Out the book, visit Amazon.com, Barnes & Noble, your local bookstore, or download the audiobook on Audible.